Thor: Love and Thunder is directed by Taika Waititi and stars Chris Hemsworth, Christian Bale, Natalie Portman, and among others. And this is the fourth film in the Thor franchise and is the latest entry in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And in this story, it deals with Thor, who is now having to recover from the events of Avengers Endgame, where he's got his body back into shape, and he's been on a journey with the Guardians of the Galaxy for a while. And essentially it deals with Christian Bale's villain, Gore, who is essentially taking these kids into capture, and he wants to essentially seek eternity. And there's some other stuff I can't go into detail, but along the way, Thor also ends up having to reconcile with Jane Foster from the other films, played by Natalie Portman, and she also wields the power of Thor like he does. And along the way, they end up having to regroup with some of the other characters from the other films, including Korg and Valkyrie and all them. Now, here's a little backstory. Now, if you've been following my channel for a while, I've been doing, these Marvel Cinematic Universe movies pretty much every time they come out, and I have really enjoyed them for the most part. And this current phase of the run with Phase 4 has been likable for the most part, but there have been some ones that I haven't really cared too much with. But I have always been looking, I am at least curious how these new movies are playing out with, and it got me really interested with this one because when I heard that they were going to essentially bring back Natalie Portman for this movie and everything, it got me interested. And one of the other, along with the biggest one being Christian Bale playing as the villain, because if you know Christian Bale playing as Batman for the Dark Knight trilogy, it's interesting how he came across that Taika Waititi wanted to bring him on and play a villain that really piqued his interest. And I'll get into some things about that later, because there's some stuff that does kind of have a downside with it, but that's what really got me interested the most with it, was him playing the villain. And also seeing where Thor was going with his story. And after seeing the film, I can say that I do like it. I thought it was fun at times, but it definitely is a step down compared to Thor Ragnarok, which I actually really did enjoy. And I thought Taika Waititi really did a great job directing with the last film that he did with that. But here I felt like it was fun to an extent, but it did definitely overstay its welcome on a lot of things. But to get my pros out of the way, I did really enjoy the cast in this. Chris Hemsworth is great as usual as Thor. He brings his comedic timing great in this, like he did in Thor Ragnarok. I really appreciate that they were giving him, some really good stuff to work with Natalie Portman's character again, especially since they haven't been together since the last one they were in, Thor: The Dark World. And I thought their chemistry was not only fantastic, but it was just really, heartwarming and very great the way that they played along with their characters again, especially some of the banter they do back and forth with each other. And and I also got to appreciate how in this one we have it to where Thor is essentially having to, have like this kind of back and forth between wanting his old hammer that Jane wields and also using Stormbreaker. And I thought that was really funny, and it was really, interesting how it was playing along with the rest of the movie. And there's a great theme in this film that I really appreciate, that it comes across to where we see where Thor is leading to that has a purpose. And I'll leave it at there because it's something that's very major that I can't reveal. But I thought that was great. And I also got to really enjoy Natalie Portman coming back. I thought she was fantastic, and they really gave her a lot more material to work with this time compared to the first two Thor movies. Because I did enjoy her in the first two Thor movies, and I liked her chemistry in those movies with Chris Hemsworth, but I can definitely see that she wasn't quite as much of a, I don't think she was written quite as well in the first two compared to this one, because they gave her a lot more material to really flesh her character out a lot more, and I really appreciate the journey that she takes in this. It actually has some stuff that I can't get into that really got me in the feel of where it was going with its journey with her in Thor. And I got to also really appreciate, the biggest standout for me is Christian Bale. I thought not only was he really great as the villain, as playing as Gore, the God Butcher, but I thought that he really brought a very good sympathetic side that was great refreshing to see in the Thor universe. And other than Loki, he's probably actually, it's kind of a three-way tie. Like, as far as best villains, he comes close to being as good as at least Loki in the other Thor movies, but he's not quite as well, because he's not quite like as great as, say, Kate Blanchett was in Thor Ragnarok. only because I felt like Cate Blanchett had more screen time than him, and she had a lot more things that were more fleshed out. But as far as like most like sympathetic villain, I'd say this is definitely the best one of the Thor films that handles it very well with its villain in that regard. So I really enjoyed that aspect, and I thought he was pretty intimidating at times, especially there are scenes where he's like in this kind of black and white kind of area that they go to, and it reminded me something like the visuals, the way they're going with, it was almost like a homage to Nosferatu and things like that. So I thought that was great, and then there is some other things that, again, I can't get into detail because I have to really avoid spoilers with this. But there's something that happens at the very beginning of the film that I really enjoyed of his character a lot. The way it played out and where it leads to him becoming the villain. But then the rest of the cast were good. You know, it's always good seeing Tessa Thompson come back as Valkyrie. I thought she was great. And Taika Waititi's Korg I liked, but I did feel like his comedy was very overdone a lot with this, with a lot of the lines that they give, compared to what he was in Thor Ragnarok. And so I'll get to some of my cons on that, but I thought his performance was fine, but I think that he did overdrew it a little, way too much on the comedy on not only as Korg, but also with the tone of the film that I'll get to later. But the rest of the film, I also felt like, as against my other pros, the action scenes are really well shot. You know, you have the great epic battle that takes place at the very beginning of the film when they're helping the Guardians and stuff that I really enjoyed. And then you get into some really cool battles that take place later, including this climax that I thought was not only really well shot, but also the visuals standpoint where it's Thor and Gore going at it and everything. I thought visually it was not only very, you know, intense, but also I just really liked the way it was shot too in those scenes. And the big climax of the end, what I thought was really fun too. And this movie does have a pinpoint of having a lot of Guns N' Roses in this movie, and I'm a big Guns N' Roses fan. I'm glad to hear a lot of their fun songs playing in this, like Welcome to the Jungle, Sweet Child of Mine, and even November Rain makes an appearance. And when they use it in the film, I thought that was just, it was a blast to hear in the theater. Because I saw this in IMAX, and the 3D I thought was really fun too at times, and you could tell that the scale of it they use when they're going to like distant worlds and stuff, it really put the visuals on point with them a lot of times, and the scale was definitely worth it on the big screen. But other than that, this is where I kind of get into some of my cons. First off, I did feel like one of the biggest things I had issues with was the fact that the movie does overdraw its comedy too much, to where they don't really have a good way of mixing it well with some of the scenes that come later for some of the serious stuff. There are some funny moments that I enjoy with the movie, but there is it to where it feels very tone deaf a lot, to where it's very like, oh, it's overkill. Because they'll be having scenes that you're really trying to be serious with and trying to really get into a lot of what's happening, but then eventually it will cut to another scene where someone makes a quip or something like that. And I felt like if they would have had a good balance with being able to let that scene play out longer and have time to breathe, it would have been able to blend it well more with the comedy. Because you can still have comedy in a fun and mixing it with serious stuff, because they've done it with the other films, including the Avengers films. But you need it in the good right place, because when you take serious moments and you immediately flip it to the next scene where someone's, you know, making a joke, it really ruins any kind of tension or any kind of emotional feel that you're trying to get out of it. And there are a couple points where it does get emotional at times, but again, it seems like it gets to where it's defaulted by having too much of the lame jokes that come out that also do feel kind of forced at times, that don't really have too much funny moments, that are very dry, and some of the humor does feel stale at times and doesn't seem quite as funny. But then the other thing I had an issue with too was with Gore, because I felt like Christian Bale was fantastic in this, but it did feel like he was very underutilized in a lot of scenes, because from what I heard, there's a lot of stuff that they cut out with that they didn't want to do because the director thought it was too dark. And that is one of the things that I feel like was a big misstep, because I know the director said that he didn't want to make a 4-hour, he had a 4-hour director's cut, that he cut a lot of scenes out. And from what I did hear, he did say that he cut out mostly jokes, but I think that there were some other stuff that they actually said was stuff that involved with the villain. And that, to me, I think should have really fleshed out better, because we would have had more of a presence that was more. and we would have also seen more of what the God Butcher can do. You know, it just really felt like there's so much more to this movie. They could have added more, or at least replaced certain scenes out of it to make it more, you know, cohesive. Well, and the other thing too is that they do make it to where sometimes there's certain things that they bring up with, like, some of the other Asgardian characters they also come across with, like with Lady Sif. She comes back in this, but they don't really do much with her, and I thought that was a really big missed opportunity that they could have elaborated on. So yeah, as you can see, there's a lot of stuff that they could have filled more time with, but the movie only ran for almost 2 hours, and it felt like there's a lot of stuff that's just not really there, so to speak. And so that was one of my other biggest issues, and because that really bogged the movie down, I felt like it was still, you know, watchable and it's a fun movie, but it just doesn't really have much of the, you know, fun. It doesn't have much of the greatness that, say, the other Thor movies did that I really enjoyed. And so with that, I'm going to give the movie a high average Joe on the Film Freaks meter. So for those of you who've also seen Thor: Love and Thunder and also the other Thor movies and the rest of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, let me know in the comments below what you thought about it, and thank you so much for watching, and I'll be seeing you in my next review. I'll see you later.